The fifth wave crashed onto the black volcanic shores of Iwo Jima, and with it came the roar of American Marine Corps determination. Sherman tanks thundered down the ramps of their landing craft, their treads biting into the dark sand as they rolled toward an invisible enemy. Among these steel beasts, 8 machines looked identical to every other Sherman on that beach, but appearances deceived. These 8 tanks carried a weapon so devastating, so psychologically crushing, that they would be responsible for roughly 1/3 of all Japanese casualties in the battle to come. They would deliver death in its most primal, terrifying form, fire. The men who operated these flame tanks would prove instrumental in capturing the island, but the weapon they wielded came with a price tag written in trauma and sacrifice. Humanity's relationship with fire as a weapon stretches back to our earliest days. From the moment our ancestors learned to control flame, they immediately recognized its potential to destroy not just things, but people. Throughout history, warriors continuously discovered new and increasingly horrifying methods to weaponize this elemental force. One of the most legendary examples emerged from the Byzantine Empire: Greek fire. This pressurized, burning concoction represented perhaps the world's first true flamethrower concept. Byzantine naval forces would unleash this terrifying mixture against enemy vessels, spraying streams of fire that couldn't be extinguished by water. The secret formula has been lost to time, and to this day, historians and chemists debate its exact composition. What remains undisputed is its reputation as one of antiquity's most feared weapons, a nightmare that could turn wooden warships into floating funeral pyres within minutes. As centuries rolled forward, fire never left the battlefield. Some applications seem almost incomprehensibly barbaric by modern standards. Imagine war pigs and other animals, their backs deliberately set ablaze, driven toward enemy formations simply to create panic and disorder. These desperate, cruel tactics speak to humanity's willingness to harness fire's psychological impact. But the modern flamethrower as we understand it, the mechanized projector of liquid fire, didn't materialize until the First World War shattered Europe. It was German military engineers who first introduced this weapon to industrial warfare, one of countless desperate innovations designed to break the stalemate of trench combat that had devoured a generation. When the Flammenwerfer first erupted across the blasted wasteland of no man's land, Allied soldiers experienced something beyond conventional warfare. The initial impact wasn't even primarily lethal. It was the sight, the sound, the sheer otherworldly horror of watching fire spray like water that broke men's spirits before it burned their bodies. The weapon functioned initially as psychological warfare, though its devastating effects on human flesh soon established a reputation that transcended fear. These early flamethrowers posed enormous dangers to their own operators. Wind could shift unexpectedly, turning the stream of fire back on the German squads wielding them. Multiple documented incidents described entire flamethrower teams being immolated by their own weapons when nature turned against them. There were even primitive attempts to mount these weapons on tanks during World War I, though these experiments produced little practical success. After the war ended, most nations showed minimal interest in continuing flamethrower development. That indifference would evaporate once American forces found themselves locked in brutal combat across the Pacific Islands. Before we examine the flame tanks themselves, we need to understand the handheld flamethrowers that preceded them. This context makes everything that follows logical and necessary. When World War II erupted, the Allied nations possessed some flamethrower units, but enthusiasm remained lukewarm at best. No dedicated flamethrower divisions existed. These weapons appeared sporadically in isolated incidents, more curiosity than crucial tool. Then intelligence reports started filtering back about German forces deploying flamethrowers in offensive operations. These reports jolted American military planners into action. sending them racing back to their design tables. Development accelerated on new handheld models, and these would reach the Pacific theater long before any flame tank rolled off a ship. Handheld flamethrowers represented a paradox, simultaneously the best and worst weapon a soldier could carry. On one hand, they accomplished what rifles and grenades fundamentally could not. They could effectively neutralize an enemy fortification by incinerating everyone inside. Grenades certainly could do damage, but once you comprehend the nature of Japanese fortifications on Iwo Jima, you begin understanding why the flamethrower often became the only viable solution. The American military produced the M1 flamethrower in a backpack configuration. With a projection nozzle, the operator aimed at whatever required burning. The system incorporated 2 tanks containing approximately 5 gallons of flammable mixture, with a smaller tank of compressed nitrogen gas positioned between them to propel the mixture outward in a jet reaching between 20 and 40 yards under optimal conditions. That represented maximum effective range. Fully loaded, the entire apparatus weighed roughly 70 pounds, delivering between 7 and 10 seconds of continuous firing time before exhaustion. The fuel traveled through the nozzle and ignited via an electrical system powered by batteries in early models, though this proved unreliable. Later versions switched to pyrotechnic ignition using white phosphorus, flares that could be activated and would burn long enough to ignite the mixture consistently. Operators fired a carefully formulated mixture of diesel fuel, gasoline, and napalm compound that created a sticky, clinging substance burning at approximately 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, adhering to everything it contacted. Experienced operators developed a particularly nasty tactic. They would first spray their target without igniting the mixture, thoroughly soaking the fortification and allowing the liquid to drip deep into interior spaces. Then a second, ignited burst would transform everything and everyone inside into an inferno. The effectiveness of flamethrowers against pillboxes compared to conventional weapons stemmed from a crucial difference. The flames didn't need direct contact with enemy soldiers to kill them. An explosion or fragmentation from a grenade can only kill those directly in the blast radius or hit by shrapnel. Japanese fortifications were deliberately engineered to minimize grenade effectiveness. They featured zigzag patterns with channels and recessed areas specifically designed so a defender could kick a grenade into a safe spot at the last moment before detonation. When a flamethrower struck a pillbox, the dynamics changed completely. Beyond the flames and extreme temperatures, the weapon consumed most of the oxygen inside the confined space. Even defenders not directly touched by fire would suffer severely from heat exposure and oxygen deprivation, their lungs burning, their consciousness fading. Perhaps we shouldn't delve too deeply into the specific physiological effects of flamethrower injuries, as this could venture into territory unsuitable for all audiences. Military studies examined whether the flamethrower constituted an inhumane method of killing. Findings ranged dramatically, from descriptions labeling it the absolute worst way to die, to arguments claiming that sensory systems become so completely overwhelmed that victims lack time to register pain. The painless theory seems dubious at best, particularly when you consider the screams that echoed from caves and bunkers under flamethrower attack. Those sounds haunted the Marines who heard them for the rest of their lives, so you understand why the flamethrower became the singular weapon capable of truly clearing those stubborn defensive positions. But consider the operator's perspective. You're carrying 70 pounds on your back, and you must advance to within hand grenade range to be effective, perhaps 30 or 40 yards from men who want to kill you. Your oddly shaped backpack is unmistakable on any battlefield. Since every enemy soldier knows exactly what will happen if you get close enough to use your weapon, every gun, every mortar, every defensive weapon they possess will focus on you. You become priority target number one. After emptying your fuel tanks, you still have approximately 45 pounds strapped to your back. And now you must navigate back to relative safety after the entire front line just watched and heard your extended stream of fire, followed by the agonized screams of soldiers in the fortification you just destroyed. You've just painted a target on your back that won't fade. Flamethrower operators didn't survive long. This grim reality would be devastatingly proven on Iwo Jima, where an appalling 94% of flamethrower operators became casualties. American troops first deployed flamethrowers against Japanese forces during battles in the Solomon Islands, where they saw large-scale use for the first time. There, the extreme vulnerability of operators became immediately painfully apparent. Someone proposed combining the flamethrower with a tank, solving both mobility and protection problems simultaneously. This idea led to the first experimental flame tanks, though initial results proved disappointing. These early conversions modified M3 Stuart light tanks by fitting them with adapted handheld flamethrower systems. Troops nicknamed them Satan tanks, which tells you something about their reputation. They offered approximately double the range of man-portable versions and could sustain fire for around 40 seconds continuously. Unfortunately, they proved notoriously unreliable, failing during combat operations roughly 40% of the time. Even worse, the Stuart's thin armor provided essentially no protection against anything more powerful than machine gun fire. The turret traverse became limited because of the internal flamethrower system installation, further reducing combat effectiveness. Still, when these Satan tanks actually functioned and managed to close with enemy positions without mechanical failure or catastrophic explosion, their effectiveness against fortifications was undeniable. This limited success convinced American military leadership that the concept deserved serious investment. Just 5 months before the planned invasion of Iwo Jima, a specialized team assembled with a clear mission: learn from those earlier failures and create a genuinely reliable, battle-ready flame tank. This time they selected the M4A3 Sherman as the base platform. After a complete redesign requiring approximately 200 man-hours per individual unit, 150 pounds of welding rod, over 1,000 electrical connections, and 150 specialized components, the new flame tank finally reached completion. In place of the Sherman's main gun, engineers installed a flame projector fed by roughly 300 gallons of fuel mixture stored inside the tank's hull. It could project a stream of fire up to 150 yards, sustaining fire for about 80 seconds before exhausting its fuel supply. Refueling required approximately 2 hours before the tank could engage again, and the fuel mixture had to be consumed within 72 hours of preparation, or it would clog the intricate system. The turret could traverse approximately 270 degrees, with elevation and depression angles similar to a standard Sherman. Most critically, from the outside, it appeared identical to any other Sherman tank on the battlefield. That final detail would soon become the Japanese defenders' most significant problem when these new machines arrived on their island. Converting a Sherman into a flame tank cost the equivalent of roughly $350,000 in today's currency. 8 of them were ready for the assault on Iwo Jima, and they would change everything. The Japanese High Command fully recognized Iwo Jima's strategic importance and had devoted an entire year to transforming it into a fortress unlike anything the Americans had encountered. The island's volcanic rock possessed a peculiar quality. It was relatively easy to excavate by hand, yet it hardened once exposed to air. Japanese engineers and soldiers carved 11 miles of interconnected tunnels, excavated 5,000 caves and underground chambers, and constructed 1,500 fortified concrete positions across the island's 8 square miles. Approximately 21,000 men prepared to make their final stand defending their homeland. Determined to make the Marines' task as difficult as humanly possible, General Tadamichi Kuribayashi understood the mathematical certainty facing his garrison. They would not survive this battle. Orders were explicit and unambiguous. There would be no evacuation, no resupply once combat commenced. Rather than the suicidal banzai charges that had characterized previous battles, Kuribayashi crafted a detailed defensive strategy designed to extract maximum American casualties for capturing the island. Every soldier received clear instructions: do not die before killing at least 10 Americans. Make them pay for every yard, every position, every tunnel. The American Navy slowly approached the island, and for 74 consecutive days, an unprecedented bombardment rained down. Warships and bombers dropped over 6,800 tons of explosives and fired more than 22,000 naval shells at the tiny island. Allied intelligence catastrophically underestimated the Japanese garrison's strength, believing approximately 4,000 troops defended the island instead of the actual 21,000. Then, they compounded this error by assuming the bombardment had effectively neutralized resistance, ordering the preparatory fire stopped earlier than originally planned. In reality, the Marines approaching the beaches in their landing craft had absolutely no idea that only about 200 of the 1,500 Japanese fortifications had been destroyed. The overwhelming majority remained intact, hidden underground. The main Japanese force waited underground in a virtually undamaged tunnel network, ready to demonstrate a form of combat the Americans had never experienced. The Marines hit the black sand beaches on February 19, 1945. Although initial landing seemed surprisingly quiet, that calm shattered quickly. By nightfall, the Marines had advanced less than 700 yards inland at a cost of 2,400 casualties. But the real battle had barely begun. Unbeknownst to Japanese defenders, among the Shermans that landed were 8 new flame Shermans, kept carefully in reserve during the first 24 hours because they represented precious, irreplaceable assets. On the morning of the second day, they entered combat. The first was deployed to assist pinned-down Marines near Motoyama Airfield. Flame Sherman 431 advanced to within approximately 100 yards of a reinforced pillbox and opened fire. A Japanese 47mm anti-tank gun engaged, striking the Sherman, but the shell simply bounced off the frontal armor, while the tank sprayed a 15-second burst over the position until flames completely engulfed it. Allowing the Marines to continue their assault, within 6 hours, all 8 flame Shermans were engaged across the battlefield, methodically spraying one pillbox after another with liquid fire, absolutely horrifying Japanese defenders. Many began abandoning their carefully prepared positions in panic once American tanks approached within range. This was still just the beginning. As the battle intensified with each passing day, the Marines finally possessed a weapon capable of destroying stubborn fortifications that had resisted even the heaviest naval bombardments imaginable. Flame tank crews operated so close to their targets they could see exactly what transpired, and it created sights no human being could forget. Marines followed approximately 50 yards behind the flame tanks, clearing anything that survived the initial assault. Standard Shermans provided heavy, suppressive fire and followed closely to protect the flame Shermans as they maneuvered within effective range. The burning mixture, when sprayed over Japanese positions, seeped through every entrance, every ventilation opening, every crack in the fortifications. If heat and oxygen deprivation weren't sufficient, the Japanese had stockpiled tons of ammunition and fuel inside those tunnel complexes. When flames reached these stores, countless secondary explosions erupted underground, killing everyone in the immediate vicinity and burying others alive under collapsed tunnel sections. Marines frequently sealed tunnel openings with explosives after flame attacks, trapping surviving defenders underground while still alive. American troops could hear muffled grenade detonations and rifle shots emanating from below ground. You can imagine what those sounds represented. Even elevated positions on cliff faces weren't safe, as flame tank crews learned to angle their vehicles on uneven terrain to fire above the usual elevation limits of their projectors, reaching defenders on cliff tops who believed themselves invulnerable. There was even a documented instance where Japanese soldiers jumped from cliffs under flamethrower attack, choosing death from impact over being burned alive. Shock and panic rippled through the Japanese defensive network. Their standard 47mm anti-tank guns proved largely ineffective against Sherman frontal armor. But they would discover methods to fight back, tactics as disturbing as the flame tanks themselves. Japanese soldiers began employing desperate measures, running at American tanks with explosives strapped to their bodies, sacrificing themselves to save their comrades. Although most never reached their targets because of protective infantry screens around the tanks, some succeeded. Flame tank number 438 was destroyed on March 11th precisely this way, when a Japanese soldier detonated himself on the tank's engine compartment, killing 3 crewmen instantly. General Kuribayashi reported to his command that the enemy's specialized flame tanks inflicted more damage than all American artillery and bombardment combined, and that his forces possessed no effective countermeasures. American engineers worked around the clock, maintaining flamethrower tanks operationally ready. These vehicles were constantly on the front line, either engaging or refueling, with repairs conducted during night hours. Fuel was prepared continuously, and flame tanks drove from front-line positions to refuel and immediately returned to combat, repeating this cycle for days without pause. Crews existed beyond exhaustion, but they couldn't stop. Military analysts estimate that flame tanks reduced Marine casualty rates by approximately 40%. By mid-March, organized Japanese resistance had largely collapsed, though ambushes and individual attacks continued for weeks after the island was officially declared secured. Then came March 21st. After 30 days of relentless combat, the remaining 3,000 Japanese defenders prepared to make their final stand in horrific fashion. 6 surviving original flame tanks were reinforced with 4 new ones, urgently shipped from Hawaii, and they were now ready for the largest coordinated flamethrower assault in the entire Pacific War. Flamethrower and regular Shermans advanced in formation, systematically setting fire to and demolishing everything in their path. Over the course of a single day, they fired 8,000 gallons of fuel mixture and suffered 92 Marines killed and 257 wounded. That remained far less than losses a conventional assault would have produced. They shattered the last organized Japanese defense completely. 2 of the original 8 flame Shermans on Iwo Jima were knocked out permanently, while the others suffered various malfunctions from continuous combat and were cannibalized for parts to keep remaining machines operational. The surviving tanks were shipped back to Hawaii, where engineers examined them thoroughly and refined the design further, eventually leading to the next generation of flame tanks like the M67 Zippo used during Vietnam. Survivors emerged from the tunnels at night searching for supplies, and some continued fighting. But of the 21,000 Japanese soldiers on Iwo Jima, fewer than 200 surrendered and survived. The rest remain on the island today, most of them buried in the very tunnels they excavated. Flamethrowers on Iwo Jima fired approximately 360,000 gallons of fuel mixture over the course of the 36-day battle. Every United States Marine who fought there agreed, without those flame tanks, They would not have captured Iwo Jima, and the already horrific casualties would have been catastrophically greater. Witnessing this effectiveness, American military leadership committed fully to converting additional Shermans into flame variants, and prepared approximately 70 of them for the planned invasion of the Japanese mainland, an invasion that ultimately never occurred. They were deployed again on Okinawa during the final days of World War II, where they consumed over 200,000 gallons of mixture against Japanese defensive positions, proving once again that in the brutal mathematics of island warfare, fire had become the ultimate equation solver.